Outstanding, the ultimate accolade for teachers. We challenge secondary geography teacher Andy Roberts to go from good to outstanding. A top inspector will observe one lesson. 2 experts will fine-tune his practice and beef up his presentation. He then gets 2 weeks to take on the advice before the inspector comes back for the final verdict.
If I don't deliver a good lesson to students in this school, they will let me know very, very quickly.
Sydney Russell School is a large mixed comprehensive in Dagenham, East London. Andy Roberts teaches geography. He's been teaching for 8 years.
I did my first degree in physical geography. Following that, I worked in outdoor education, and that's probably the career that directed me towards teaching.
The geography department rates Andy's teaching as good.
My motivation for teaching is the subject which I teach, which is geography.
And what I'd like you to do is see if, as a team, you can match that statistic with the correct statement.
Andy loves his subject and he uses that to impart a love and an understanding of it to the students he teaches.
What 3 things do you think are most important to make a successful Olympics? Not quite ready, need a little bit longer, okay?
The lessons ain't all copy out of a book or nothing like that. He talks to us and we give him the answers back, so it's all interacted.
Andy will focus the challenge on his Year 9s.
I've taught those students now since they joined Sydney Russell School. So we have a very positive working relationship. It's a nice class to be observed with.
1 minute.
Geography as a subject can be a little bit tedious at times, I have to admit, but he does make it quite interesting for all the class.
Mr. Roberts inspires me because he's shown that he doesn't just teach geography, he lives geography.
It's really challenging to set targets for yourself or recognise what it is that really could give you a lift at this stage in your career. I've been teaching 8 years, I'm competent, a good teacher. It's really hard to get CPD that pushes you that little extra.
Andy's teaching a unit of lessons on urban regeneration, focusing on the Olympic Park 3 miles from the school in East London.
This is the first time I've actually now put together a series of lessons which will allow students to study regeneration and has a progression with regard to their skills, knowledge and understanding. Hopefully they're able to apply those skills to other regeneration projects. That's the key, that's what I want really at the end of it.
It's the morning of his observation. With hundreds of inspections under her belt, School Inspector Claire Gillies leads inspection teams up and down the country. She certainly knows an outstanding lesson when she sees one. Andy's got 60 minutes to impress our inspector.
Right, good afternoon, people. Now, the purpose of the lesson is to obviously achieve these objectives. And what I want you to do is go through each of the objectives and decide how well you can do that at the moment. For example, the first success criteria, Amber, says...
I understand why East London was chosen to host the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games.
OK. You make a decision.
Some outstanding lessons may be calm, but you're watching the pupils and there is a great deal of thinking and learning going on just by the subtlety of the teacher's questions. So it's very important to look at the learning through the learner's eyes to see whether there's some outstanding features there.
I want you to have a think about whether you're in favour of the Olympic Games being held 6 kilometres west of this site in 2012. If you're against the 2012 Olympics being held in East London, you stand on this side of the room. Rebecca, why are you in favour of the 2012 Olympic Games being held in East London?
All these people coming over are obviously going to need accommodation, food and all that, so that'll bring in a lot of money for the country.
Brilliant. Sit yourself down. Sit yourself down. As quick as you can, please. You have an OS map of the area of the Olympic Park. You also have an aerial photo. In addition to that, you have a collection of photos. And what I want you to do is use your map skills to work out which photo matches which of those locations on the OS map.
Wait.
There's the red dots there, that's a train station.
Right, that's the marsh there,
yeah?
So that must be number 3 because it's right near the marsh.
Cycle circuit, so it's going to be down here.
Oh, well spotted.
Oh, yeah. You're doing very well.
The lesson today, it was quite challenging. The information we had was quite hard to gather at first, but when we had the Ordnance Survey map and we knew where the landscapes were, then it was easy to understand.
Location number 5, where do you think that is? Fiona?
E.
Which is?
Lee Valley Cycle Circuit.
And how do you know that that is number 5?
Because there's a cycle circuit right next to it.
Absolutely. OK, in front of you there's a pack of lots of opinions. These are things that people have said either on telly or in interview or in the newspaper. Pick one of the resources that you feel is most powerful. I want you to then move to the side of the room where your opinion lies. So it's quite interesting. There seems to have been a shift. Let me go to Ellie. Which opinion is most powerful for you?
The Olympic bulldozer clears all objections out of the way. There can be no debate, no exceptions, no modifications. Everything must go.
Why is that opinion for you so powerful?
He's saying get rid of the old to make way for the new, but some of the old stuff is useful to London.
So I'm going to ask you to go back to your seats, and the objective sheet I asked you to start out at the start to fill out at the front. Can I ask you to now do that again at the end of this lesson?
So how did Andy get on?
Thank you very much for letting me share that lesson with you. Let's just highlight and celebrate all the enormous strengths that are in your teaching skills. Excellent variety of activities. We had the sort of listening to each other, we had the kinesthetic by just a quick moving about. Perhaps the biggest compliment to pay you is that one of them said, well, you know, it's putting the world into context. So I thought, great. It was just such an enormous amount of content today that I felt the word I just felt prompted to use was almost overloaded. All the ideas, the content, where you were going, almost I felt we need a day for this.
I feared before the lesson maybe it was content rich, but I liked each element of the lesson so much.
Yes.
I wanted people's opinions to be a part of it. I wanted all of those images. There is an overload there, you're absolutely right.
Perhaps it could have just been thinned a little. I just feel there's perhaps a touch of your own personality that could come through a bit more. Your feelings, your views might just add a little warmth of your personality. Good afternoon, people was the start. It was an interesting
I wasn't
one.
conscious, it's obviously
it's an
something
interesting
I
phrase.
did, yeah.
You've got off to a very good start, and I'm sure the potential's there for some outstanding lessons as you move through the topics.
I think her comments were actually very perceptive. She made a comment about me not sharing my personality with the students. One of my strengths is my classroom management, there's no doubt about that. And now I have that classroom management, maybe now I need to think about me and my personality.
With the first observation behind him, the inspector highlighted Andy's need to reduce the amount of content in his lessons and to bring more personal insights and warmth into his teaching. Now it's time to bring on the experts. To boost Andy's progress, help comes from voice and communications coach Ulrika Schulte-Bauchloh and secondary geography expert Ruth Totterdell. They start by watching his lesson.
And what I want you to do is go through each of the objectives and decide how well you can do that at the moment.
I felt that it wasn't a very engaging start for the students, just filling in a sheet about the objectives, and he said the purpose of the lesson was to fulfil the learning objectives, which doesn't sound terribly exciting. The thing I'm going to work on with him most is that beginning of the lesson, trying to connect the children to the Olympic Games and set them off on these activities, but try and maybe link them all with a purpose.
What I want him to do is be a little bit more personally involved. Where are these photos taken?
Yeah.
How did he get this idea? His vocal delivery is great. His body language is much more withdrawn. So I notice he covers a lot his mouth, folds his arms, covers his chest. So I will work simply on things like, have the courage to reach out. It's okay.
I think he is a passionate teacher, but I don't think that passion comes over. So I thought there were lots of strengths to the lesson. Is there anything that you feel didn't go very well?
I wanted to challenge the students with regard to what strategies do I use to make sense of this. However, there was too much, quite simply, and I shouldn't have overloaded it quite as much.
Right, Andy, one of the things we're going to work on is the purpose of your lesson. Now, right at the beginning, you said that the purpose was to achieve the objectives, and there was a long list of objectives. But I thought, what really was the aim of your lesson?
I've reflected on those objectives, and I think the problem is that there was too much going on in that lesson, and I should have focused on a few of those objectives for the time in that lesson.
Yes.
And there was 2 lessons there, maybe 3.
Just want you to maybe think of like 4 things that if you overheard on the way out, you'd have been really pleased to hear.
What I want them to be saying, there's more going on than I had realised.
Do you think that all those purposes were achieved in the lesson?
I do think the majority of them would have asked some of those questions to themselves.
Rather than just having a list of objectives, it's good to actually think, well, what do I want these children to go out with? I'd like to now move on to what I think perhaps was the weaker part of the lesson, and that was the start. I think we could have really set that lesson in the context of an inquiry. And there are 4 stages of an inquiry lesson. First, creating the need to know, using data, making sense, and reflecting on the learning.
You have an OS map of the area of the Olympic Park. You also have an aerial photo.
The absolute strength of your lesson was in this using data. But I felt that at the beginning, this creating the need to know was just missing. There's London. Why was that chosen in the UK? And not only that, it's actually just down the road. So why, out of this whole world, is the Olympics going to be down the road? That is a really interesting question. Then it went on to making sense. Just from listening to what was going on, I didn't really get a sense of what it was like. I knew there was a station, a bit of a railway.
What I wanted them to do is come up with certainly an image in their mind of what that place was like a year
But you see,
ago.
I think that was more like a place to start in the introductory lesson. Maybe if they'd had like those little plastic whiteboards, all write down 10 words that describe that area.
You know, if I asked them to write down 10 things about what this area is like, it's a little bit superficial. I'm getting them to describe the images rather than make sense of them. I just felt I didn't want to lead them too much. I really wanted them to take charge and decide what they want to do with these photos, how they would use them, reflect on that, and then in the future maybe they will be expected to produce something which is their interpretation of this site.